this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a digital marketer in life sciences. And in this episode of Life Science Success, my guest is Oliver Loson. He's a vice president of business operations at Holoclara, who brings a wealth of experience in translating scientific discoveries from academia to commercial applications. And so with that, welcome, Oliver. It's great to have you on.
Thank you, Don. Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I've enjoyed listening to your other podcasts and your other guests. So hopefully I can impart a little bit of my experience. I'm not sure I would call it wisdom, but opinions that I might have.
That would be great. And yeah, it's great to have you on. And also, great that you had a chance to listen or watch a few of the other episodes, because I think there are probably quite a few guests that are on that haven't really spent the time, and then they still kind of wonder exactly how's this thing going to go. But normally we follow a pretty typical path, which starts with you telling us a little bit about, what is your background, and then how did you become interested in neurosciences and especially life sciences?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for the introduction. I'm currently the vice president of business operations at Holoclara. We're a small clinically staged company that's spun out of Caltech, and I'll tell you guys some more about that later on, specifically some of the stuff that we're doing and we're excited about. But I guess my career in science started pretty early. In high school. I did a lot of what you called silent sustained reading. So in the state of California, there's this big push to help students become better readers. And for silent sustained reading, I always picked up magazines like New Scientist, National Geographic, Scientific American. And I remember reading a number of articles in those magazines that talked about the brain, right? And about the decade of the brain and how research was getting closer to understanding how we learn and how we remember things. And I just thought it was fascinating. This whole idea that as a species, what makes us, right? What makes us humans is our consciousness, our ability to rationalize at a higher order, and that this is all being done by this organ that's right between our ears, right? I think that really drove me into the neurosciences and wanting to study that. So I went to UC Riverside because they had a neuroscience program focused on that, where you could learn all the molecular and biochemical, just the really nitty-gritty biology stuff about the brain, as opposed to, psychology and emotional, social behavior kind of stuff, which is also really neat. And I went in as a pre-med, thinking I would go into medical school afterwards. I was always really interested in science, thanks to my family. I have an uncle who's an engineer who loves rocket science. He's a former JPLer, as they're called. He worked at JPL for a number of years, working on NASA missions. And he would take me as a kid to do model rocketry, and that was always a lot of fun. My grandpa was an industrial engineer. He worked on several industrial scale chemical processes and taught for a long time at his local university. So science runs deep in our family.
Oh, very good. How did that overall experience at Riverside shape your career path?
Yeah. So when, like I mentioned, I go to UC Riverside as a pre-med. I was doing a little bit more coursework because I wanted to do neuroscience, and I was, in addition, doing all the coursework you have to do as a pre-med student. And I did some undergraduate research and really enjoyed the first lab that I was with, and then joined another one where I was able to also get a fellowship that gave me the ability to spend more time in the lab. It was an NIH undergraduate research fellowship, which really kind of transformed my life, and it transformed my career path because it was there that I really got bitten by the research bug. And I remember I would just spend all hours I could in the research lab there at Riverside. We were studying really interesting research. We were studying how astrocytes, which are kind of the unsung hero of the brain and the nervous system in general, how they interact with neurons and help neurons communicate with one another. So that was kind of a really growing early trailblazing area of neuroscience. Nowadays, people are understanding astrocytes and the tripartite synapse, as it's called now, much more so than when I was an undergraduate at Riverside. And that pushed me into not pursuing the medical school track. I decided to apply for graduate school. And I knew I wanted to end up somewhere where I could do some really innovative research, and also, cross-disciplinary research, because I'd always really liked engineering. I also really like physics, and I thought no better place to do that than Caltech. There's a number of neuroscience researchers there that I got to know through some interviews, and landed there to do my doctoral work.
And then, but you also transitioned and did more stuff with things like corporate partnerships at Caltech and managing technology. So what motivated that transition?
Yeah. So, when I landed at Caltech, I was planning to do the pretty traditional route, stay in academia, rather do my PhD, right? Defend it, do a postdoc, and then look for a faculty position and set up a research program. And it was while I was at Caltech, really during my first 4 years, that I learned that there are kind of these other career trajectories for persons with a PhD, right? For scientists that are very much science focused, but whose goals are slightly different, right? In academia, generally speaking, the goal is discovery, right, and innovation, finding the unknown, understanding the not understood. And while that's really interesting, through some club experiences and also reaching out to Caltech alumni and persons who were in other fields, I learned that there are ways that a scientist can contribute to the translation of those discoveries, to the translation of those innovations into things that affect our daily lives. For example, I had a friend who ended up she was also studying neuroscience at Caltech, and she defended her thesis, and she ends up in this thing called the Technology Transfer and Corporate Partnerships Office at Caltech. And she started telling me about what that's all about. And one of the stories that really stuck with me was how that office, together with the researchers at JPL who developed it, had found a way to commercialize one of the first imaging chips that had been sent on a rover, or perhaps it was some other instrument that was sent to space as part of the JPL NASA program, right? Well, those chips ended up being in the first generation of smartphones that could take photographs. And it makes perfect sense, right? You had to miniaturize a camera in order to put it on a payload that you have to send to space. Why couldn't you use that miniaturized payload to put on the back of a smartphone, right? And I was like, wow, who would have thought, right? That's amazing. And that's, at the heart of what technology transfer is trying to do for university innovations. And to make a longer story shorter, learning more about what goes into that and that career path, I decided to apply and was fortunate enough to end up in that office. And it was a great place to learn about how technology and new innovations have to be further developed before they actually become a product, right? There's a whole lot that comes after the discovery. There's a whole lot that comes after the invention. And that's the really hard part, right? Once you've got a commercial product, there's challenges in selling it and making sure that you're distributing it correctly and all that. But getting to that place is a long road.
Yeah. I mean, I've faced it a few times myself, and it has its definite challenges as well, along with lots of different paths that you could take, along the way, depending on whatever the challenges are. But
right.
So in your time at Caltech, you also had experience in working on a startup focused on developing next generation therapies for cancer patients. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just taking a couple steps back and adding a little bit more to what we were just talking about. So when I joined the tech transfer office, you get the opportunity to see kind of firsthand how these things are translated, how these things are developed, and also how some technologies, some innovations just don't really have a market or a near-term application that would justify the capital necessary to develop them, right? So I learned a lot about that and became really interested in it. And also really interested in those who were actually taking technologies, innovations forward and doing that product development, discovery kind of stuff. I thought that was a really fun thing. I would spend, months working with faculty, students, or staff, or maybe an entrepreneur outside of the university who was really interested in a piece of technology the university had, thinking about the markets, thinking about the development strategy, thinking about the business plan, the budgets, all that kind of stuff, right? Because as a licensing officer, the philosophy at Caltech's tech transfer office is to help in that way, help folks develop those technologies. And then they would go off and do that, right? And you'd read press releases about how they accomplished something or learn about, some milestone that they met. And I would be like, well, that's the fun part right there. I that's what I want to be doing. And yeah, about 4 years plus into the role in the tech transfer office, and having built relationships with several faculty members, one of which is Professor Brian Stoltz from the chemistry department there. I started thinking like, I'd really like to be involved in this, right? I'd really like to be boots on the ground, helping to develop a technology, especially one affiliated with Caltech, right? And Brian, for a long time, had been thinking about wanting to start a company. He has a really interesting suite of chemical processes that his laboratory rather had developed over the course of his being a professor there. And almost every one of them had an application in the pharmaceutical sciences, particularly for medicinal chemistry. And so we saw a real big opportunity to apply it there. But I, being young and inexperienced and certainly never having done product development, I just didn't really know where the application was. And fortuitously at that time, there was an entrepreneur in residence program starting at Caltech. And the then entrepreneur in residence had a couple of ideas, hooked Brian up with a UCLA oncologist, and 1200 Pharma was born. That's that oncology company that rapidly took off, developed more than half a dozen programs, 2 of which made it to the clinic. And in fact, I believe there are still several patients today that are being dosed with some of those novel agents that we developed.
That's excellent. And then how did your business, how did your experience in the tech transfer office translate over to the current role that you have focused on business operations?
Yeah, absolutely. You learn a lot there that is really important for business operations, business development, principle of which is negotiation and contract negotiation more specifically. Understanding the structure, the outline of what an agreement for a particular purpose should look like, what the typical terms, the boilerplate terms as we sometimes refer to them, mean, and why they're important for both parties, how to push back on certain aspects, and if you're going to push back, what a reasonable counter proposal might be. All this is really important, right? It's very legalese language, but there are some I think experience-based ideas and applications that one can apply to any negotiation. And so that's really important in the circumstances of a private small company like Holoclara or 1200, because a lot of times you are externalizing research and discovery efforts, you're externalizing development efforts. You might even be externalizing commercialization efforts, right, through a partnership or otherwise. And so having an agreement in place that gives the appropriate safeguards for both parties, um, the appropriate expectations of both parties, that's really important. The tech transfer office was a great place to learn that kind of skill set and thinking. The other place that is incredibly important is the attention to the intellectual property, right? For companies like ours, the intellectual property is really what we have, right? The product's not quite there yet, but we have patents and patent applications that are protecting that intellectual property, and will protect that intellectual property into that period when we finally get to a commercial state, right? When we start selling it. So understanding patent prosecution, understanding strategies behind that, and understanding how to more broadly build one's portfolio, especially when you're considering different markets that you eventually want to end up with, right? Maybe you want to be a US focused company. Maybe you want to be US and Europe. Maybe you want to go to the whole world, right? Patent prosecution and obtaining patents in other jurisdictions can be similar to what happens here in the US with the USPTO, but every country has its own patent law and nuances. So knowing those are really important.
Yeah, I would imagine that your experience around a lot of these sort of things definitely, directly relates. I also, I look at the fact that in my view, business operations, just cuts across so many verticals inside of an organization where you have to, play,
Yes.
but also collaborate and, let alone it be a startup where you got to do that anyway. I feel like,
Yeah, absolutely.
business operations definitely does that anyhow.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so tying that back to science, right? The reason that, at least the reason I think I do my job well is because, understanding the science that we're doing here is fundamental for me making sure that whatever we externalize, right, or whatever we communicate outside of our organization is correct and aligned with our scientific goals, right?
Yeah, and I mean, not an easy thing to translate overall. I mean, I talk a lot to different marketers who want to either expand more into life sciences or spend more time in our space. And one of the things that, I oftentimes sort of go back to is, how would you get the fundamental knowledge that you need around the things that you work in? I mean, I know how I get it. And it's typically through, finding smart people that, can kind of look at the world as is, but then also look at the world and say, okay, this is how I put this person's new invention or whatever in the best light possible, right? And how I help to shape the story around that organization. And it's not easy to find those people. I mean, luckily I've got a massive pool of individuals, both that listen to the podcast, but also just connections in general. And that has afforded me an awful lot. But again, it's I feel like a struggle for anybody else looking from the outside in, right? Trying to understand, why does this thing have to be so different? Well, I mean, it's not easy to get a medical degree that you were pursuing at the beginning, and it's also not easy to get a PhD, in most of the sciences. So there's a lot of struggle that's gone on in that, and a lot of that pain leads to experience for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And kind of expanding on what you're saying there, it's also kind of incumbent on us, right, to be better communicators of our science, from a marketing point of view, from business development, operations point of view, um, especially today in today's age, right, where science oftentimes um, has a hard time landing with persons who may not have expertise in it, right? And it's because it can be complex, right? And we scientists, we love to talk in complex terms and use our jargon. Um, and if someone doesn't have that same jargon, it can be hard for them to follow it. So communicating in a concise and easily sort of consumed way is really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, just for most of the people that don't know this, I mean, most ads that you see on TV or things that you see as advertisements, in print are oftentimes written at a 5th or 6th grade level. And so,
Look at that.
and that's pretty advanced for most people. Now all of a sudden, now you've got to translate complex, in your case, neuroscience related topics at a 5th or 6th grade level. And I
Yeah.
wish you luck.
Yeah, right. And layer on it the legal language and implications and patent law.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
nevertheless, yeah, I think communication is key, and translating that, yeah, that's definitely at the heart of what I do is taking the science and making sure that we communicate it in a way that, through our agreements, covers us the way we need it, and through our patents, make sure that we're protecting the innovations we're working on.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about Holoclara. What is it that you're working on? What's its mission? And I would love to know more about the specific areas of the life sciences that you focus on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think I said at the top, but just to reiterate, it's a relatively small company, but it's clinically staged, and we're developing small molecule therapies for immune-related diseases. That's our goal. In our approach, really, it's leveraging the beneficial aspects of the host-parasite relationship. And the great thing about that is that's a relationship that's been millennia in the making, right? Roundworms, parasitic roundworms, and mammals and in humans have coexisted for a really long time. And where this all kind of got started for our co-founder and CEO Andrea is if you look in the clinical literature and you also look at epidemiological studies, you can see that humans who have roundworm infections or where those kinds of infections are prevalent in on Earth, folks there are much less likely to experience immune-related diseases like asthma or allergies or even like IBD. And in fact, some folks who have seen that epidemiological evidence have done clinical studies where they'll take these subjects, these persons who are suffering from such diseases, they will purposely infect them with roundworms, and you get an improvement in those immune mediated diseases. Of course, no one wants a roundworm infection or the side effects that go along with that. And so what Andrea did when she started her graduate work at Caltech is really focus in on this and understanding parasitic roundworms. And what she discovered was a small molecule language that's used by roundworms that turns out is also recognized by mammalian immune systems. And it's almost as though it quiets or it tempers the activity of the immune system in a subtle way. It's sort of like a Jedi mind trick. Nothing to see here, right? So that presumably, so that the roundworm is left alone by the immune system. Um, and the inspiration, the innovation, the stroke of genius for Andrea back then was, well, what about if these small molecules could actually be the things that are helping folks that we've seen, with the epidemiology and the clinical studies? Maybe this is what's helping their immune-mediated diseases. And so what Holoclara has found over the years is when you take rodent models of human diseases like asthma, like IBD, like eosinophilic esophagitis, you get an amelioration of those disease phenotypes when you use these small molecules devoid of the parasite, right? We have means of manufacturing these small molecules chemically and only giving that to our rodent models. You see a real benefit. And this gives us the opportunity to harness the good of that relationship, right, without the bad of the parasitism. And so to sum it up, that's our mission, right? Holoclara's mission is to harness the benefits of this molecular language, of this host-parasite relationship to help those who are suffering from immune-mediated diseases.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it really is an interesting mental journey as well to try and think about, science in the lab to somebody just asking the question of, I wonder if we did this,
Yeah.
what would happen, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. In academia, that's the beauty of it, is you can ask what might be considered otherwise a crazy idea like that. Some people call it fishing expeditions, right? That you can put yourself out there and you can find the funding to test some of these kind of wilder or not typical types of experimental questions, right? And it was thanks to that and the research that Andrea was able to do at Caltech that Holoclara exists today.
Very good. So what are some of the key projects that you're currently managing, and how do they align with the company's overall goals?
Yeah. So generally speaking, Holoclara has three really important areas of work. Certainly, our clinical development of our lead asset is a big part of that. Um, we're also trying to better understand this relationship between roundworm and roundworm small molecule language and human physiology, mammalian physiology, and specifically with the immune system. But we're not limiting ourselves there. We've thought long and hard, and we're starting to try to do experimentation where we're learning more about other places where these molecules might have application. And along with that, we're trying to discover the next generation of worm-derived therapies. So for me personally, I've been kind of spearheading and helping to co-lead our clinical development efforts. Our lead asset was tested in a first-in-human phase 1 with the goal of understanding, characterizing its safety and pharmacokinetic characteristics. And we've wrapped up the study up a little over a couple months ago. In the next few weeks, we'll be making a press release about it, actually. So stay tuned. We've got lots to say about that, and it's all good. We're really, really excited about the continued development and the promise for this small molecule, and thinking about its future. I'm also responsible, as we've been talking about, for the business operations of the company, and that includes everything from the business development, contract negotiation, to interfacing with external service providers who are doing science and development aspects for us. And one of the greatest things that I love about my job and love being at Holoclara is I don't have to, I get to be a scientist too. I get to be involved in some of the, yeah, exactly. I get to be involved in some of the strategic decision-making, experimental planning for our discovery-focused stuff. And for me, that's incredibly gratifying. A lot of times, in companies, roles tend to be a little bit more siloed. You have persons whose focus is more narrow, but in startups, especially like Holoclara, you get to wear a lot of hats, and it can be a little stressful. It can be a little overwhelming at times, but it's also a lot of fun because you get to exercise the various parts of your brain.
Yeah, I loved. So there was a guest a few weeks ago that used this this analogy, and I think this is now maybe the third episode where I've used it, but I loved it so much that I was like, to me, this is the perfect translation of business operations and what I heard you say with regards to some of the scientific side of things that you're getting to do. And the comment was that in different roles that we're in, especially whenever you're in senior leadership roles in any organization. And, I feel like startups have this unique sort of environment as well. But the analogy is that you get to be both in the balcony and in the dance. And so the whole idea is like, in the balcony being strategic, and in the dance actually being down and doing the tactical things and helping move the company forward. But I sort of took that thing and just continued to reiterate it because I thought it was such a great analogy for what all of us see and have to go, okay, so it's time to switch from this brain to that brain.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's a great analogy. One other one that I've used, I'm a big soccer fan. And I think that for startups, especially ones that are early on in their research and development, they have to be a sort of total football team, right? Everyone's got to know how to play every position. and the ball gets moved around and people switch positions at times, and you leverage your expertise at different times on the pitch, right? We're definitely a total football organization, and that's one of the things I love about it.
One of the things I can thank Ted Lasso for. I only know total football from Ted Lasso, so there you go.
What a good show. I'm glad that it's helped to spread the beauty of soccer, because it really is a beautiful sport.
Absolutely. So, can you elaborate any more in terms of, the innovative approaches or technologies that your company is currently exploring, and how do you stand to improve human health?
Yeah. So, I would say one of the most innovative things that we do is to focus in on this host-parasite interaction, right? To understand its molecular components and to understand how um, the things that are being secreted by roundworms, by these parasites, are potentially beneficial, right? And it takes a little bit of um, a pause in your logic, right? Because you think parasite and it's always a bad thing, right? But as the research has shown, the epidemiology has shown, parasites aren't all bad. And this idea that we as a species are as clean as we are, right? It's a relatively new thing, right? Some people call this the hygiene hypothesis. One of the reasons that we have so many nowadays, why we have a greater prevalence of immune mediated diseases, is because our immune system gets bored, right? It's got nothing to fight off. You don't have any parasites living in you. Most of us shower every day. These kinds of things um, cause a lack of balance between our immune system, its normal functions, its innate functions, and what it would otherwise be doing. So I think that in that, Holoclara is very innovative, and we're trying to learn more about this so that we can develop next generation of therapies where we can leverage the good beneficial aspects of it, right? We're also doing a lot of, because it's such a complex thing, right? This interaction between two different organisms, right? Especially the interaction with the host's immune system, because any immunologist will tell you it's really complex. Um, you need to have techniques that can read really deeply in every assay, and techniques that can give you a wealth of data that you can use to better understand what's going on. So we use a lot of mass spectrometry. We use a lot of single cell approaches, including doing some single cell sequencing. And we also leverage a lot of primary human samples and cells, primary human monocytes and other types of immune cells, because we're trying to leapfrog the translational aspect, right? Using an in vitro model that would be indicative of something that might be going on in the human system. Rather than doing that, we go straight to the human system.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it definitely is interesting to me. The things that run through my mind is that don't surprise me, I guess, about what you're doing is, you think about some of the things that scientists have done with viral vector loads, as an example, or, leveraging other parts of our bodies or immune system to do additional things. So, I mean, it's not that those parts are not shocking to me. What is a little shocking overall is just the level of understanding that you're trying to get around these roundworms, and and just the impact that they could potentially have as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that, and I think this is happening, across all types of disciplines, right? Is the reanalysis and, not taking things as dogma, right? And because now we have techniques and we have approaches that help us better interrogate it, or at least look at it from a different angle. And that certainly has helped, Holoclara's mission. And in a lot of ways, we've always been anti-dogmatic and looking for things where maybe others didn't think there really was something.
So important. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you face in your current role, and then how do you overcome them?
Yeah, I think nowadays, maybe you'd probably get this answer more often than you would have. Budgeting is a big problem, right? In companies that are privately capitalized, fundraising is tough. It's a tough climate right now. And really, what that means is we just have to be better about prioritizing and better about um, understanding what experiments, what tasks we need to accomplish to meet our next milestone, right?
Mhm.
And to keep the company moving forward in such a way that it carries its mission forward and it generates value and satisfies the needs of private capital, right? At the end of the day, the biology is always going to drive us. We're a science focused company, and but we certainly need capitalization to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the greatest piece of leadership advice that you've ever received?
That's a that's a good one. Yeah. You know, I think someone at the tech transfer office had once told me that you can always make someone do something, right? But they're gonna probably resent you for that, right? Like nobody wants to be told what to do or made to do anything. But if you help them understand why they should be doing it or why they need to be doing it, right? Whether it be for, the greater purpose of your organization or an advancement of whatever their task is, or maybe even for their career, right? Um, it's like you're also teaching them to think critically about it, and you're winning their trust, right? Because they see that it's not an order, right? It's not you ask them to do something. It's you taking the time to to be a thought to be thoughtful with them, right? And help them um, be thoughtful about the things that they do. I think also, from the leaders that I've had that I've really admired, those have always been the ones that lead by example, who are exemplary themselves, right? Who don't mind having to do, the rolling up the sleeves and doing the hard work, um, who delegate when they need to, who delegate when they know that they need to be focusing their attention in other places, who are communicating what they're doing, right, and why they're delegating, and why it's important for for the organization to be doing something the way it's doing it, right? Transparency. That's, I think, a really important a really important part of leadership. Um, and Yeah, I mean, anyone who can bark orders can think themselves a leader, and certainly can is a leader, right? But at the end of the day, someone who behaves in a way that garners a following is probably more than just a leader, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's interesting to me too, given the sort of the different generational levels of focus on different aspects of let's say the same point in time or the same object, even in trying to bring it over the finish line. It's interesting to me to watch how many perspectives can be um, developed about one particular topic overall. And I also oftentimes find in conversations that I'm leading that when people most disconnect, it's because of seeing a different perspective that you're not seeing yourself. And sometimes
Hmm.
that can be beneficial. And, you think about PhD students, right? I mean, if you're studying a particular thing and having somebody else provide a different level of input from the outside is a really good thing because, I mean, oftentimes there's a lot of solitary work. I know that happens with all of us in any of our examinations of any one thing, and when you get that other perspective, it can really benefit people, where if you just were to rush to the finish line and say, I did all this good stuff, and oh, by the way, here it is. Now all of a sudden, if you were to get that other perspective at the finish line, um, it's not nearly as welcome to have at that point in
Yeah.
time. I mean, we'd all much rather have the objections, the reasons why things are working the way that they are, the adjacent studies that are going on. I mean, all of that stuff can greatly benefit all of us. And to me, it's the same idea whenever you're a leader of people. Having people with different perspectives is a great thing. You just have to figure out how do you communicate with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the context, right? It's funny. I hadn't thought about this until just now, but so I have a 6 and a 9-year-old, right? And I got to tell you, being a parent and raising these 2 kids has taught me more about leadership, um, in some ways than some of the things that I've observed, right? With my 6 and 9-year-old, so much can be done so much more simply without the "oh, dads," right? If I just give them context, right? And cues like, "Hey, listen, guys, tomorrow we're going to go and do A, B, and C. So that means in the morning, I'm going to need you guys to be with it, right? We got to, brush our teeth, get our shoes on, make sure to have breakfast." And it's when I spring it on them that morning, right? "Hey, we got to hurry up. You didn't brush your teeth," and right. More reactionary. That puts them in a tough position, right? And additionally, with the context, we're doing A, B, and C because we got no food in the fridge. So we got to go to the supermarket. B, you guys were the ones who wanted to do gym, right? So we're going to gymnastics in the afternoon. And C, we've got to do this other thing, right? Giving them all that context, reminding them of why we're doing all the things that we're doing, really helps them get it together. And I'm not trying to stretch the analogy, right? We're more than just 6 and 9-year-olds, but everybody can be so focused on what they're doing, right? On their task at hand, that we can lose that perspective, right? And that greater picture. And so a good leader is good about contextualizing things, reminding us, and keeping everyone's values and mission aligned, right?
Absolutely. So, Oliver, what is it that inspires you?
Oh, that's a big question. Yeah, I really like soccer. um, but as a scientist, I think for me, it's that prospect of discovery, right? Um, Adding knowledge to the small little corner of biology that I'm working on right now. Um, but yeah, I guess most of all, the prospect of changing people's lives, right? How cool would it be to say that you were a part of an organization that developed the first therapy for disease X, right? Or a better therapy for disease Y. For me, that that that's an ultimate inspiration. Um, I'm very proud to have been associated with programs that made it to the clinic with 1200 Pharma. Very proud that we were able to help some patients there, and I hope that we can do the same thing for Holoclara.
Milestones to be proud of for sure. What
Yeah,
concerns you?
yeah. I think in today's climate, what concerns me is, generally speaking, we talked a little bit about this, how our society at large, our greater society, even our global society, regards science, right? The lack of um, an appreciation for why it's so important, right? The current administration's approach to science in general, to university funding and how that curtails innovation at universities. I mean, universities are the place where there are innovation engines, right? That's where these discoveries and innovations, 90% of them, probably more, come from, right? Everything from biotech to, the chip in the back of your phone, right? Has a root in some discovery or some invention that happened in a university research setting. And so that worries me, right? Because I think that it's really important for our future that we continue to support that, and that we continue to have a robust and vibrant research community in our country.
I couldn't agree more. I think the 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 interesting thing to me will be the impact that what's going on right now has long term.
Mhm.
And I said this to people before, and I have no way of like pointing a finger right now at like, where that horizon will be. However, I've heard repeatedly from my friends who are in universities who are saying, hey, look, other universities from other countries are here actually on campus recruiting
Yeah.
our best researchers and taking them away. And
Yeah.
by the way, not having that next generation cancer drug or next generation immune therapy funding, could actually kill that next generation company. And so it just won't be there. I mean, there will be a vacuum of some sort. And I was sort of indicating the same thing even prior to what's going on right now, that look,
Mhm.
I mean, just the tightening of VC funding, the lack of, the same level government funding for cancer plus other therapies, is something I think everybody should be questioning. I think we should all be saying, look, why can't we have a more balanced, sort of view on the world? And maybe there is somebody out there that has that, right? But I also think, given where we currently are, the current struggles are just going to lead to eventually somebody turning around and going, hey, where's that thing that's always, right here? And oh, by the way, the, all of the, offices that are working on, bringing out the science are just saying, look, we couldn't fund this anymore because we didn't frankly have funding.
Yeah.
Will be a really, I don't know, sad time, I guess is the best way to summarize it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think you made a really important point. The consequences are immediate, but the long-term consequences are really, really scary. And we're not going to really see those for a number of years. Um, but that's, I think, the more worrying aspect of this.
Yeah. Last question. What excites you?
Yeah. A lot of things, soccer. No.
What team? I
I
mean, you keep mentioning soccer so
Oh,
much.
I'm an LAFC fan. I'm here in Los Angeles. We're out of the Club World Cup, but we had a good go at it. Um, yeah, but science related. You know, I think that if you think back to like the 1980s and how research was done then, right? And how then research has been evolving, right? And even before the 1980s, right? I'm just thinking of the 1980s because some real inflections happened there. But with the advancements that are happening today and certainly in the future, like it's just so exciting to think. And I don't know that it's a dream. I think this will continue to happen where we're going to start being in a place where we call more diseases cured, right? And there's not just therapies, there's cures for those diseases. I'm actually pretty excited about AI. I think AI can be a really powerful tool for researchers, even for time efficiency. Like for example, I think AI is incredibly powerful for summarizing papers, right, and taking away really important points from them. And I've used that quite a bit because we're all really really busy, and you're trying to make the most of the time that you can, right? And so I'm always an advocate for and am looking for places to enhance efficiencies. And I think AI can help in that way a lot. How AI helps with research itself is still, I think, an open question. There are much smarter people working on that than me. Um, but for the day-to-day tasks that can be, time consuming, like reading a paper, it can be really, really useful. And then
Yeah,
the other
I mean,
thing,
we certainly use it all the time on my side. So yeah, I
for
couldn't be a
sure.
bigger advocate as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's great at curating, the information that you need. We're working on a protocol. It's the first time we're doing an assay. Do we use this acid or do we use that acid, right? At what concentration? How long should we incubate it, right? And it can give you a slew of references to go and cross-check it against, and great suggestions for what might be the most pertinent number for your particular assay, right? So I mean, it's a powerful tool. I was going to say one other thing that I'm excited about is how biotech is growing in the greater Los Angeles area. So Los Angeles isn't traditionally thought of as a biotech hub, but more and more so, you're getting companies that choose to stay here. There's great universities here, right? There's great research going on here. The infrastructure is getting a lot better, and there's even some venture capitalists that are choosing to open shop here. So I'm excited at the prospect of the greater LA region becoming a better place to do biotech.
Yeah, but I mean, it's great to see the expansion and the focus, and especially in our area to have the ability to leverage tools, systems, and just the knowledge all in one area is always a beneficial thing as well.
Totally, yeah.
Well, Oliver, thank you so much for joining me on the Life Science Success Podcast. I really greatly appreciate you being here and for sharing the story about Holoclara and what you're working on. This is my first worms based podcast, so it's good to have that context as well, and at least better understand what it is that you're working on there.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the invitation, for the opportunity to tell you about Holoclara, about a little bit about myself and what inspires me. It's been excellent to talk about it. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it. And last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.